If you're lying in bed, close your eyes. Let your breathing slow down. Let the noise of the day fade away. Tonight you'll fall asleep not just to a story, but to a journey. The story of a boy who dreamed big in a small town, who believed that talent was nothing without hunger, and who turned his quiet confidence into destiny. This is the story of Jude Bellingham, the boy from Sturbridge. The air in Sturbridge always smelled faintly of rain and grass, the kind of English suburb where dreams seemed too far away, where football was something you watched, not lived. But in a modest house on a quiet street, a young boy dribbled a ball against the garden wall until his legs ached. The neighbors learned his rhythm, the steady thud of the ball again and again late into the evening. He was small, lean, and focused in a way that didn't belong to children. His father, Mark, was a police sergeant but also a local footballer. He knew the game, and more importantly, he knew the mindset it demanded. He would watch Jude with that knowing smile, half pride, half warning. "You can't cheat the work, son," he'd say. And Jude never did. At school he was quiet but intense. Teachers described him as serious, sometimes too serious. When other kids laughed at cartoons, he talked about matches. When they dreamed of holidays, he dreamed of stadiums. His notebooks weren't filled with doodles. They were filled with football formations and names of players he admired. His heroes weren't just stars. They were thinkers: Steven Gerrard, Frank Lampard, Zinedine Zidane. Even at 10 years old, he said he didn't just want to play like them. He wanted to understand them. His parents noticed early that something about him was different. He wasn't faster than the other kids, not yet. But he read the game differently. When he played in youth matches, it was as if he could see the future. He knew where the ball would land before it did. He knew when to step, when to wait. His coaches at Birmingham City's academy, which he joined when he was only 7, often watched in silence. "He doesn't play like a boy," one of them said. "He plays like he's solving something." Those early years were hard. He was too young to train full-time, but he begged to stay longer, to do extra sessions. The staff sometimes had to tell him to go home. "You'll burn yourself out," they said. But he shook his head. "I can rest when I'm good enough." He didn't realize then that good enough would never be a destination. It would become his way of life. He watched his father play on Sundays, studying his movements, his strength, his leadership. But what impressed him most wasn't the goals. It was the calmness. "Dad never looked rushed," he once told a friend. He made football look peaceful. That idea stayed with him. That real mastery wasn't chaos, it was control. At home, his room was small, but his imagination was massive. He'd line up socks as if they were defenders, practicing footwork, shadow dribbling, even rehearsing celebrations. On the walls hung posters of English greats and one of Real Madrid, a dream that felt impossibly far away. But every night before bed, he whispered the same sentence: "I'll play there one day." As he grew, so did his understanding. By the time he was 12, Birmingham's coaches had already begun to treat him differently. They spoke to him not as a kid, but as a captain. He wasn't the loudest, but his presence was magnetic. Other boys listened when he spoke. If training got sloppy, he tightened it up. If someone's head dropped, he lifted it. He wasn't just learning how to play. He was learning how to lead. But leadership came with loneliness. When he played badly, which rarely happened, he blamed only himself. His father noticed that pattern and once asked, "Why do you get so angry when you lose?" Jude looked down. "Because I know I could have done more." Mark nodded slowly. "That's a gift and a curse," he said. "Use it wisely." There were setbacks too. He wasn't always the biggest, and sometimes he was pushed around by older kids. But he never complained. He learned how to use his body smarter, how to turn, how to protect the ball with timing instead of size. Brains beat brawn, he'd tell himself, became his mantra. At 14, he began training with older age groups. The game was faster, harder, more brutal. Some thought it was too soon, but Jude wanted to feel that pressure. "You can't grow in comfort," he told a coach. Even when he made mistakes, he didn't retreat. He'd replay them in his head until he found the right solution. Every failure became a lesson. Off the pitch, he remained grounded. His mother, Denise, kept him balanced. She made sure he still went to school, still helped around the house, still stayed humble. "Talent doesn't make you special," she said once. "Kindness does." He carried that with him too. Even now, years later, he would speak about her as his anchor, the calm behind his chaos. His first major test came when he joined Birmingham City's under-18s at just 15 years old. Most players at that level were nearly adults, stronger, quicker, more experienced. But Jude didn't shrink. In his first few matches, he didn't just hold his own. He stood out. His awareness was uncanny, his composure unreal. Reporters started whispering, "Who's that kid?" His coach smiled. "That's Bellingham." He had become something rare, a teenager who played with the patience of a veteran and the fearlessness of a child. Opponents would try to intimidate him, but it never worked. He didn't react to provocation. He responded with performance. "You can't knock him off his balance," one rival coach said. "It's like he's older than all of us." By 16, everything began to move faster. Scouts from Premier League clubs started appearing at his matches. Manchester United, Chelsea, even Liverpool all watched. But Jude wasn't distracted. He was loyal to Birmingham. "They gave me everything," he said. "I'll give them something back." That mindset impressed everyone. In an age where many young players chased fame, Jude chased responsibility. His senior debut came in 2019. He was just 16 years and 38 days old, the youngest player ever to represent Birmingham City. The stadium buzzed with disbelief when his name appeared on the lineup sheet. "A child?" one fan asked. "No," another replied. "A footballer." The moment was surreal. He stood in the tunnel, surrounded by men twice his age, the noise of the crowd rumbling above. His heart raced, but his expression didn't change. When the whistle blew, he didn't hide. He demanded the ball, fought for duels, ran tirelessly. He didn't play safe, he played free. And when he scored his first goal weeks later, the stadium erupted. The boy who had once watched from the stands now had his own chant echoing through them. But even then, he refused to let success distract him. When journalists asked how it felt, he answered calmly, "It's a start." To him, achievement wasn't a finish line. It was a checkpoint. "There's always more," he said. Behind closed doors, his coaches couldn't stop talking about his mentality. "He's got the body of a kid," one said, "but the brain of a professional." That balance, youth and wisdom, became his trademark. He wasn't perfect, but he was present, fully, every minute. At night, after matches, he still watched replays. Not to admire himself, but to learn. He'd pause, rewind, analyze. Even in victory, he saw flaws. "The standard never moves," he wrote in his notebook. "Only you do." The media started calling him England's next big thing. He hated that label. "You can't be the next anything," he said. "You can only be the first you." It wasn't arrogance. It was identity. He didn't want to follow footsteps. He wanted to make his own path. Then something remarkable happened. At the end of that first season, Birmingham made a decision that stunned the football world. They retired his number 22 shirt, not for nostalgia but for respect. "He represented everything we want to stand for," the club said. "Hard work, humility, intelligence." Jude was shocked. "I'm just getting started," he said quietly. But deep down he understood. The number 22 wasn't about age or fame. It was about potential, the symbol of a journey that had only just begun. That summer, offers poured in. England's biggest clubs wanted him. Europe's giants called. But Jude wasn't seduced by glamour. He looked for purpose. When Borussia Dortmund reached out, he listened carefully. They didn't promise him fame. They promised him development. "We won't treat you like a kid," they said. "We'll treat you like a player." That was all he needed to hear. Before leaving Birmingham, he visited the training ground one last time. He walked through the locker room, past the empty benches, and placed his hand on his old shirt, still hanging under glass. "Thank you," he whispered, "for making me ready." It was a quiet goodbye, the kind he liked best. That night, as his family packed for Germany, he sat by the window, the lights of his hometown flickering in the distance. It was raining again, just like when he started. He thought of his father's lessons, his mother's patience, the long evenings kicking a ball against the garden wall. Every sound, every moment, every tear had led to this. He didn't feel fear, only gratitude. The boy from Steerbridge was ready to become something more. And as he closed his eyes that night, somewhere between excitement and calm, he whispered the same promise he'd made years ago. "I'll play there one day," only this time there meant the world. When the boy from Stourbridge became a man in Birmingham, it didn't happen with noise or ceremony. It happened quietly, through repetition, through weight, through the kind of invisible work that doesn't fit into highlight reels. Jude Bellingham wasn't supposed to rise so quickly. 16-year-olds weren't meant to carry professional teams. But he did. And he did it with a calmness that made everyone else feel older. Not him. The Championship, England's second division, is not kind to dreamers. It's rough, fast, and unforgiving. It eats up youth and spits out potential. But when Jude stepped onto that stage, he didn't flinch. He understood that football wasn't about who shouted the loudest. It was about who thought the fastest. From the first whistle, he played as if the game were slowed down for him, as if he could see what others couldn't. He wasn't a flashy player. He didn't chase tricks or applause. What made him stand out was his rhythm, the way he received the ball, the way he turned, the way he made hard things look simple. The crowd began to notice it, that strange blend of maturity and mischief. He'd glide past older defenders with a touch that felt deliberate, never accidental. It wasn't arrogance, it was control. He didn't play like a boy trying to prove something. He played like a man who already knew. Inside the Birmingham locker room, respect came fast. Veterans who had doubted him started asking for his opinion. Coaches stopped explaining small details. They realized he'd already seen them. He became a student and a teacher at once. After matches, he'd stay behind, reviewing footage with the analysts, asking questions that sounded more like those of a manager than a teenager. Why did the fullback press there? What happens if we overload the left side earlier? His brain never rested. One coach said, "He doesn't just play football. He studies it like science." But football is never just about skill. It's about resilience. The championship demanded strength, tackles that bit, crowds that jeered, stadiums that tested you. Jude learned how to handle it. When bigger opponents tried to muscle him off the ball, he didn't fight them head-on. He let them overcommit, turned away, and slipped through the gaps. He wasn't afraid to take hits. "You can't play this league without scars," he once said. He collected them proudly. Off the field, he stayed the same. His friends still called him Jude from down the road. He still carried his school backpack to training because he didn't like drawing attention. When journalists tried to build a story around his youth, he shrugged it off. "Age doesn't play football," he said once. That sentence spread like wildfire, printed on posters, quoted by fans, repeated by coaches. But to Jude, it wasn't a slogan. It was common sense. The pressure was enormous. Every newspaper wanted to write about the teenage sensation. Every big club wanted to sign him. Scouts filled the stands every weekend. Some kids would have drowned in that attention. Jude used it as fuel. His parents made sure the noise never reached him. His mother traveled with him to every match. His father kept him grounded in perspective. They weren't just parents. They were guardrails, keeping him from falling into the trap of believing he had already made it. "Talent fades without humility," his father told him one night after a game. Jude nodded. "Then I'll never stop learning." His first full season became something of a phenomenon. He played over 40 matches, more than most seasoned professionals, and did it with consistency that baffled analysts. He wasn't just surviving, he was dictating. The midfield became his territory. Opponents couldn't believe it. "He plays with arrogance," one rival coach said. But it wasn't arrogance. It was belief. The kind of belief that came not from ego, but from hours, from sweat, from quiet conviction. One winter evening, Birmingham faced a tough away game. The pitch was muddy, the rain relentless, the crowd hostile. Players slipped, passes failed, tempers flared. But in the middle of the chaos, Bellingham played with serenity. He never looked rushed. He controlled the tempo like a conductor guiding an orchestra. After the game, the coach said in disbelief, "He's 16. Reporters ran with the quote. It became a statement, a warning, and a prophecy all at once. His leadership began to blossom naturally. When his teammates argued, he calmed them. When they doubted, he reminded them. "We're better than this," he'd say simply. No shouting, no anger, just presence. Even older players listened. You couldn't ignore someone who played with that kind of certainty. He wasn't leading because he wanted to. He was leading because no one else could. As the season went on, he began to attract global attention. Big clubs called, agents circled, rumors spread. Manchester United invited him to Carrington. He toured the facilities, met legendary figures, and was offered everything: prestige, exposure, money. But when he left, his mind was quiet. He didn't want easy fame. He wanted growth. "I need somewhere that will make me better," he told his father. It was a decision that would define him forever. But before any move could happen, there was Birmingham. His city, his club, the one that gave him his start. The fans loved him fiercely. They sang his name like he was one of their own. Because he was. He didn't see himself as a star. He saw himself as a worker in the same uniform as everyone else. He didn't care about fame. He cared about leaving the shirt in a better place than he found it. He had rituals. Every match day he arrived early. He'd walk around the pitch before warm-ups, alone, headphones in, eyes scanning the stands. He said it helped him feel connected. "You can't play for people you don't feel," he said once. For him, Birmingham wasn't just a club. It was family. In the dressing room before his final match for the Blues, he sat quietly for a long time. His teammates were laughing, taping ankles, joking as usual. Jude was calm, reflective. One of them nudged him. "You okay, kid?" He smiled. "Just thinking." The player laughed. "You're always thinking," Jude nodded. "Yeah, that's why I play. That match was electric." He ran, tackled, shouted, fought like he was still trying to earn his place. When the final whistle blew, he didn't celebrate. He just clapped the fans one by one, his eyes full of gratitude. The stadium knew what it meant. They didn't need an announcement. They felt it. This was goodbye. When the club retired his number 22 shirt after that, it wasn't about hype. It was about respect. No one that young had ever represented maturity like that. In his last press conference, he was asked if he felt ready for what came next. He smiled slightly, the same calm expression that had become his signature. "I've been getting ready all my life," he said. Then he stood up, shook hands with every reporter, and walked away. No theatrics, no grand gestures, just quiet confidence. When the offer from Borussia Dortmund came, it felt like destiny. A club known for developing young players, a city known for its passion, and a team that valued growth over glamour. He chose them not because of money, but because of belief. "They see me as a player, not a project," he told his family. It was the kind of sentence that defined who he was. The night before leaving England, he sat outside with his brother Job. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. After a long silence, Jude said, "Promise me you'll chase your own path." Job nodded. "I will," they smiled. There were no tears, no dramatic goodbyes. Just two brothers who understood what ambition really meant, sacrifice and love at the same time. As the plane lifted off the next morning, he looked down at the city that raised him. The streets, the rooftops, the small training ground where it all began, everything looked smaller now. But the feeling inside him had never been bigger. He thought of all the people who told him he was too young, too serious, too ambitious. He didn't feel anger. He felt gratitude. They had made him tougher. He put in his earbuds, closed his eyes, and listened to the soft hum of the engines. Ahead of him was a new language, a new culture, a new test. But that didn't scare him. Growth never did. He whispered softly to himself, almost a prayer. "Be brave. Stay humble. Work harder than everyone else." And with that, the boy from Birmingham became the young man bound for Germany, carrying not just his luggage, but his discipline, his focus, and his quiet fire. He didn't know it yet, but Dortmund would not just shape his game, it would sharpen his soul. The flight to Germany felt longer than it was, not because of distance, but because of thought. Jude sat by the window, watching the clouds pass below him, his mind quietly racing. He was leaving everything familiar, family, language, comfort, for something uncertain. But uncertainty never frightened him. It focused him. He saw it not as risk, but as responsibility. When the plane landed in Dortmund, the air was sharper, the streets unfamiliar, the signs unreadable. Yet something inside him whispered, "You belong here." The first day at Borussia Dortmund was overwhelming. Yellow everywhere, the walls, the flags, the shirts. It felt alive, pulsing with history. The stadium, Signal Iduna Park, was bigger than anything he'd ever seen. Standing in its empty stands before his first training session, he looked around and thought, "One day they'll sing my name here." It wasn't arrogance. It was a quiet promise to himself. Training under Lucien Favre was a shock. The tempo was ruthless, the precision demanded absolute focus. The German players were disciplined, efficient, structured. Everything ran like a machine. Jude was different. His game had soul, rhythm, emotion. At first he felt out of sync, like a heartbeat in a metronome. But slowly he learned. He didn't try to change who he was. He learned to adapt, to blend the freedom of English football with the discipline of the German system. "You can't lose what makes you special," one coach told him. "You just have to make it stronger." Language was another challenge. He didn't speak German. In the dressing room, jokes flew past him. Instructions sometimes sounded like noise. But instead of retreating, he listened harder. He stayed after training, asking translators to repeat phrases, memorizing words, learning how to communicate without speaking. Football became his common language. His gestures, his positioning, his awareness, they spoke louder than words ever could. He was 17 when he made his debut for Borussia Dortmund, the youngest Englishman ever to play in the Bundesliga. The headlines called him fearless, but that wasn't it. He wasn't fearless, he was prepared. He had been preparing for moments like this all his life. When he stepped onto the pitch, the noise of 80,000 fans hit him like a wave. It should have been overwhelming, but he felt calm. The ball came to him. He turned, passed, and moved like he'd done 1,000 times before. Football didn't change. Only the stage did. Within weeks, he began to earn the respect of his teammates. Big names, international stars, players who had seen everything, started trusting the teenager. They noticed how he never hid, never complained, never looked lost. When he made mistakes, he didn't sulk. He nodded, fixed them, and moved on. "He plays like he's been here for 10 years, Mats Hummels said once. Jude smiled when he heard that, not because it was flattering, but because it was proof his mentality was visible. He loved the intensity of Dortmund. The fans were relentless, the expectations huge. Every touch was judged, every move analyzed. But that pressure fed him. He used it to sharpen his focus. "Pressure is proof that you matter," he said once in an interview. Became one of those quotes fans repeated endlessly, painted on banners, printed on shirts. Off the pitch, he built his life quietly. No nightlife, no distractions. He lived with his family at first. His mother moved to Germany with him to make the transition easier. "She cooked, he studied film. She keeps me human," he said. "She reminds me who I am when the noise gets too loud." His father called often, always with the same question. "Are you learning?" Jude always answered yes. At Dortmund, learning was constant. Every day felt like an exam. New drills, new tactics, new standards. Favre and later Marco Rose demanded versatility. Jude played deeper, higher, wider, sometimes all in the same match. "He's not a midfielder," one assistant said. "He's everything." He pressed like a defender, passed like a playmaker, attacked like a forward. His energy seemed endless. But what impressed coaches most wasn't his physical ability. It was his emotional maturity. When others panicked, he steadied them. When the team fell behind, he lifted them. It wasn't leadership by volume. It was leadership by presence. His relationship with Erling Haaland became one of the stories of Dortmund. The fiery Norwegian and the thoughtful Englishman. Opposites who shared the same hunger. They pushed each other, teased each other, learned from each other. Before big matches, they'd sit together in silence for a few minutes. No words, just focus. "He's got something," Haaland said once. "Something you can't teach." Jude didn't chase headlines, but they found him anyway. When he scored in the Champions League against Manchester City, the team that had once ignored him as a kid, he didn't celebrate wildly. He just smiled. It wasn't revenge. It was realization. "You never need to prove people wrong," he said later. "You just need to prove yourself right." By 18, he was one of Dortmund's most important players. The fans adored him not for goals, but for attitude. He fought for every inch of grass like it was his last. He wore his emotions openly, shouting, clapping, demanding us, but always within control. In interviews, he spoke with the clarity of a veteran. "You can't lead without example," he said. "And you can't give example without consistency. But growth never comes without pain." The physical toll of the Bundesliga was brutal. He trained like a soldier, played like one too. Some nights he returned home exhausted, bruised, drained. His mother worried. "You can rest, you know," she told him. "Rest is work too," he laughed. "I'll rest when the world stops moving. There were moments of doubt, of course, games where things didn't go right, when the weight of expectation pressed down harder than usual. But he had learned how to turn frustration into focus. After losses, he was the last to leave the field, not sulking, reflecting. He'd stand in the center circle, looking at the stands, breathing in the noise, letting it burn into memory. "Every pain is a teacher," he once wrote in his journal. His confidence sometimes made people misunderstand him. Some opponents thought he was arrogant, the way he talked to referees, the way he carried himself. But those who knew him knew better. He didn't speak out of ego. He spoke out of passion. When he challenged authority, it wasn't rebellion. It was honesty. "He just cares too much," one teammate said. "And he doesn't hide it." Then came his rise in the England squad. Southgate called him up, and suddenly, the boy who had left home for Germany was back on the biggest stage, representing his country, carrying both his youth and maturity. In interviews, he didn't play the humble act. He spoke with conviction. "I'm here because I belong," he said. That sentence caused debate, but also admiration. England had seen plenty of talented youngsters. They hadn't seen one so fearless in mind. Back in Dortmund, he became vice-captain before turning 20, the youngest in the club's modern history. When the coach announced it, the locker room erupted in applause. He was stunned. "Are you sure?" he asked. "You've been leading us for 2 years," the captain replied. Now it's official. Leadership suited him. He began holding team meetings before matches, discussing not just tactics but emotion. "We can't always play perfect football," he said once, "but we can always play brave football." Those words defined the team that season. They didn't win every match, but they fought like they belonged everywhere. His relationship with the fans grew stronger, too. The Yellow Wall, Dortmund's massive homestand, sang his name with a rhythm that felt like thunder. He'd walk toward them after every game, hands on his heart, eyes lifted. For him, they weren't an audience. They were part of the match. "They don't just watch us," he said once. "They carry us." As he matured, journalists began to ask about the future. The rumors were endless. Real Madrid, Liverpool, Manchester City. He never answered directly. "I'm happy here," he said. "But I'm also hungry." It wasn't a tease. It was truth. He wasn't chasing a move. He was waiting for the right moment. The next step, not the next stage. In his last months at Dortmund, he became something greater than a player. He became a standard. Young academy kids were told to train like Jude. Coaches used his name as a verb. To Bellingham meant to play with intelligence, courage, and heart. On his final day at the club, he stood in the empty stadium again, the same place he had stood when he arrived. The seats were quiet now, the echoes softer. He looked around, remembering the noise, the faces, the nights under the lights. He thought of the boy who had walked in afraid to speak German, and the man who now led in every language that mattered. Effort, energy, and excellence, he whispered to himself. "Thank you for making me fearless." And as he walked out of Signal Iduna Park for the last time, the staff stood and applauded. Not for his goals, but for his grace. For the way he carried himself. For the way he made others believe. He didn't cry. He didn't look back. He simply smiled. The quiet smile of a boy who had always known where he was heading. The next destination would be bigger, brighter, louder. But inside, he was still that same boy from Stourbridge. Thoughtful, grateful, relentless. And though he didn't say it out loud, one thought echoed in his mind as he boarded the flight to Spain. Let's see if the world is ready. The first time Jude Bellingham pulled on the England shirt, it didn't feel real. He had imagined it since he was a child. The white kit, the anthem, the weight of history on his shoulders. But when he stood there on the touchline, listening to the roar of Wembley, it was different. It wasn't about pride or glory. It was about responsibility. He looked up at the flag, felt the air vibrate with the voices of thousands, and whispered under his breath, "Do it justice." For him, football had never been about moments. It was about meaning. Wearing that shirt meant carrying generations, the heroes, the heartbreaks, the hope. And he was ready for all of it. His debut came quietly, without fireworks or fuss. Just a 17-year-old boy stepping onto the biggest stage in football and playing as if it was another day in the park. But for those watching, it was clear this wasn't normal. There was something about the way he moved, The calmness, the certainty. He didn't hide. He wanted the ball, demanded it even. He's a kid, one commentator said, but he plays like a captain. And that was the truth. Jude didn't play with arrogance. He played with authority. He understood that leadership wasn't about shouting. It was about setting a tone. When he pressed, others followed. When he passed, others trusted. When he smiled after a mistake, it told everyone that it was okay to keep going. In the dressing room, he was still one of the youngest, but he carried himself like he'd been there for years. The older players, Kane, Henderson, Walker, noticed it. They saw how he listened more than he spoke, how he absorbed everything like a sponge. "He's different," Henderson said once. "You can see it in his eyes. He's not overwhelmed. He's waiting." And he was. Waiting not for permission, but for the right moment to take command. That moment came sooner than anyone expected. In a crucial match when England's midfield looked tired and hesitant, Southgate turned to the bench and pointed. "Jude, warm up." He jogged down the sideline, calm as always, the noise of the stadium rising with every step. When he came on, everything shifted. He didn't need to do something spectacular. He just made everyone around him better. His touch brought confidence. His energy brought belief. His fearlessness spread like fire. By the time the final whistle blew, England had found something they'd been missing for years. Rhythm, control, and a heart that beat with both skill and soul. The media erupted. "The future of England," they wrote. "The new Gerrard." But Jude didn't like comparisons. He respected the legends, but he didn't want to wear someone else's shadow. "I'm not trying to be the next anyone," he told a reporter. "I'm trying to be the first me." It sounded like a headline, but to him it was just truth. He didn't care about fame. He cared about improvement. Between tournaments, while others took vacations, he trained. Not because he feared losing form, but because he couldn't imagine not working. "The game doesn't wait," he said once. "So why should I?" That mentality impressed everyone around him. Southgate called him a rare kind of professional, young in age, old in discipline. His teammates called him relentless. But what defined him most wasn't how hard he worked. It was how much he cared. He cared about every pass, every tackle, every teammate. If someone missed a chance, he was the first to pat them on the back. If someone looked nervous before a match, he'd say quietly, "You're ready. You've earned this." He had a way of making people believe in themselves, not with speeches, but with sincerity. He didn't see himself as above anyone. He saw himself as part of something. "It's not about me," he said. "It's about us. Always us." During the European Championship, he became England's emotional compass. In training, he set the standard. In games, he set the pace. Opponents began to notice how he played with both fire and control, the perfect balance of chaos and order. When England scored, he celebrated like a child. When they lost, he stood in silence, absorbing the pain without hiding from it. "You don't grow from winning," he said once. "You grow from staying after losing." One night, after a tough elimination, he stayed on the pitch long after everyone else had gone down the tunnel. The stadium was half dark, the crowd dispersing, the grass glistening with dew. He looked around, breathing slowly, and whispered, "One day we'll finish what they started." It wasn't for the cameras. There were none. It was a promise to himself, to his teammates, to the country. That promise began to define him. He played every match after that with a deeper sense of purpose. Fans started seeing it, the way he never coasted, never gave less than everything. They called him the heartbeat. Journalists wrote that he carried himself like England's past and future in one body. Even former players like Rooney and Lampard praised his maturity. "He's what we always hoped for," they said. But with greatness comes scrutiny. Every gesture, every expression became analyzed. When he spoke passionately to referees, some called it arrogance. When he gestured after fouls, they said he was emotional. But he didn't care. "If they see emotion, good," he said once. "It means I care." You should be worried when players stop caring. He became the bridge between generations, the link between the veterans who had endured heartbreak and the newcomers who dreamed of rewriting history. He learned from everyone. He asked questions constantly about tactics, recovery, psychology. "Knowledge keeps you humble," he said. "The more you learn, the more you realize how much more there is." At the World Cup, he was electric, not just technically, but emotionally. When he scored, The roar of the fans seemed to lift the entire team. It wasn't just the goal. It was the feeling he brought with it. Conviction, courage, connection. England didn't win that year, but they left with something more valuable: belief. And at the center of that belief stood a 19-year-old who played like a general and smiled like a kid. After the tournament, his fame exploded. His social media doubled. His name trended globally. His highlights flooded every feed. But nothing about him changed. He still trained the same, spoke the same, moved the same. When reporters asked how he handled pressure, he said, "Pressure is a privilege. It means people expect you to do something special." He never distanced himself from fans. After every match, he'd stop for autographs, take photos, talk to kids. "I was one of them once," he'd say. You don't forget that. His humility wasn't an act. It was instinct. The louder the world became, the quieter he stayed. At 20, he became a leader in every sense, not through seniority but through example. When England played poorly, he didn't blame. He gathered the group, spoke softly, and reminded them who they were. "We're not chasing history," he said once. "We're writing it." Southgate trusted him completely. "He's got something inside that you can't teach," he said. "Some players need to be told what to do. Jude tells the game what to be." It was the ultimate compliment, not about talent but about control, understanding, awareness. As his reputation grew, so did the spotlight. Transfer rumors, sponsorships, comparisons. Everyone wanted a piece of him. But he handled it all with remarkable composure. "You can't control attention," he told a journalist. "You can only control your reaction to it." That line became one of his most quoted. Off the pitch, he became a quiet inspiration. He visited youth academies, spoke to kids about discipline and patience. He told them the truth, that talent wasn't enough, that hard work didn't guarantee success, that character mattered most when no one was watching. "You don't become great when people cheer," he said. "You become great when you keep going after they stop." And so, as England entered a new era, one of expectation, pressure, and hope, Bellingham stood in the middle of it all. The boy who once practiced alone in the rain was now the man carrying a nation's belief. Yet he didn't see it as burden. He saw it as honor. In an interview after a crucial qualifier, a reporter asked, "Do you ever feel the weight of it all? The eyes, the hopes, the dreams?" Jude smiled softly. "No," he said, "because it's not just on me. It's on all of us. And that's what makes it beautiful." That night, back in his hotel room, he sat by the window, the city lights shimmering below. His body was tired, his mind full, but his heart was calm. He took out his phone and looked at an old photo. Him at 10 years old, holding a muddy ball, smiling. "We made it," he whispered. "But we're not done." He didn't mean just himself. He meant England. He meant every fan who still believed, every player who still dreamed. The boy who had once watched the Three Lions from his living room was now one of them. And he was exactly what they needed. Not a star. Not a savior, a symbol of hope. The day Jude Bellingham arrived in Madrid, the sun was relentless. The city shimmered under its light, and everything, the buildings, the streets, the air, seemed to hum with history. This was Real Madrid, the club of Di Stefano, Zidane, Ronaldo, the place where talent was tested and greatness confirmed. He had dreamed of it since he was a boy staring at the poster on his wall in Stourbridge. Now the poster was real. The white shirt wasn't fantasy anymore. It was fabric, heavy with meaning. As he walked into the Santiago Bernabéu for the first time, he didn't look at the cameras or the banners. He looked at the pitch, and he whispered to himself, "Now prove you belong." The presentation was loud, full of flashes and noise, but inside he was calm. He waved, smiled, posed, polite but grounded. Reporters shouted questions in Spanish and English. "Why Madrid? Why now?" He answered softly, "Because this is where football feels eternal." It wasn't a rehearsed line. It was truth. He hadn't come for fame. He had come for purpose. Training began the next morning. The heat, the pace, the standard, everything was sharper. Carlo Ancelotti watched him closely, saying little at first. Jude noticed the difference immediately. This wasn't a club that demanded energy. It demanded elegance. Here, football was an art form. Every touch mattered. Every pause carried weight. He studied Modric and Kroos, two players he had admired since childhood. Watching them train was like watching time itself move with precision. They didn't run faster than others, they just ran smarter. Every gesture had intention. Jude didn't try to copy them. He observed, learned, adapted. Ancelotti, with his quiet wisdom, spoke to him one afternoon after training. "You don't have to be anyone else," he said. "You're here because of who you already are. Don't lose that." Those words settled in Jude's heart. From that day, he stopped worrying about fitting in. He focused on flowing in. The language barrier was smaller this time. He had learned from Dortmund how to adapt, how to listen before speaking. Within weeks, he understood enough Spanish to joke, to connect, to belong. His teammates loved his energy, respectful, driven, joyful. Vinicius took to him immediately. "You're crazy," Vini laughed after training one day. "You never stop running," Jude grinned. "Neither do you." That friendship would soon define Real Madrid's new era. Two young stars, different styles, same hunger. The fans adored him from the start. His debut came at San Mamés, one of the toughest stadiums in Spain. The pressure was immense, but he thrived on it. From the first minute, he played with authority. Strong in tackles, elegant on the ball, fearless in attack. Then came the goal. A rebound fell his way, and he struck it cleanly, sending it into the net. He didn't celebrate wildly. He just raised his arms and smiled. The away fans chanted his name, "Bellingham! Bellingham!" And in that moment, he understood something simple but profound. Real Madrid doesn't ask you to be perfect. It asks you to be inevitable. The weeks that followed were unreal. He scored again and again. Goals that didn't just win games, they defined them. Late winners, headers, volleys, runs from deep that felt unstoppable. The Bernabéu sang his name with reverence. The world began to talk not about potential anymore, but about presence. He wasn't the future of football. He was the now. But what impressed Ancelotti most wasn't his scoring. It was his composure. "He plays with joy," the coach said. And joy is the rarest form of intelligence. Jude never celebrated goals with arrogance. He celebrated with gratitude, eyes closed, arms out, like he was thanking something bigger than himself. The fans felt that sincerity. They didn't see a foreign star. They saw a Madridista. Off the field, life in Spain brought peace. The noise around him grew louder, but inside he stayed quiet. He spent his evenings walking around the city, often alone, just thinking. "Madrid doesn't feel like pressure," he said in an interview. "It feels like purpose." He visited the training ground early every day, staying long after sessions to work on details, positioning, timing, small touches. Perfection wasn't his goal anymore. Mastery was. In the locker room, even legends like Modric and Kroos admired him. "He's 20 and already understands everything," Kroos told reporters. Jude smiled when he heard it, but didn't dwell on it. "Compliments fade," he said. "Standards don't." He treated every match like his first, full of awe, full of intention. There was one game that changed everything. El Clásico. Barcelona versus Real Madrid. The rivalry that divides the world. For Jude, it was a dream turned reality. The atmosphere was fire and noise. The crowd roared, and in the middle of it all, he stood still for a moment, closing his eyes. When the match began, he played like he belonged to the occasion. He scored twice. One a thunderous strike from distance, the other a last-minute winner. The Bernabéu exploded. His teammates mobbed him. The fans lost their voices. And as he walked toward the corner flag, arms open wide, smiling into the lights, it felt like destiny had finally caught up with him. After the match, Ancelotti said, "He plays like he's been here for years, maybe longer." That night, Madrid didn't sleep. The headlines were everywhere. El Rey Inglés, the English king. But Jude didn't read them. He called his parents instead. His father told him, "Enjoy it, but remember who you are." He did, always. Even in glory, he stayed grounded. He kept studying the game, still writing notes after matches, still analyzing his mistakes. "You can't let comfort kill your curiosity," he said once. That philosophy guided him through everything. When things went well, he worked. When things went wrong, he worked harder. He had found in Madrid what every great player eventually seeks, a balance between beauty and burden. The expectation was immense, but he wore it like armor. He didn't shy from responsibility. He ran toward it. When Real Madrid needed someone to step up, he was there. Not because he craved the spotlight, but because he hated the idea of letting the team down. Leadership isn't asking for the ball, he said. It's wanting it when it burns. His bond with Vinicius grew stronger. On the pitch, they moved like music. One rhythm, two melodies. Off it, they were brothers. They shared jokes, meals, long conversations about football and life. He's the calm to my chaos, Vini said once. Jude laughed. And he's the chaos to my calm. Together they carried Real Madrid into a new chapter. Youthful, fearless, full of joy. Ancelotti often said that Jude's greatest gift wasn't his talent, but his presence. He makes others better, the manager said. You can't teach that. In training, he encouraged teammates, celebrated small victories, guided the younger ones. Football isn't about being perfect, he'd tell them. It's about being useful. As the season went on, he became a symbol, not just of Real Madrid's future, but of football's evolution. Old-school grit mixed with modern grace, fans across the world saw something familiar in him. The work ethic of yesterday and the confidence of tomorrow. He makes you believe again, one commentator said during a Champions League night. Believe that football still has soul. There were challenges too. Tired legs, media pressure, endless comparisons. But he met them all with the same quiet fire. Noise doesn't win matches, he said. Focus does. That focus carried him through everything, from El Clasico glory to Champions League drama. And when Madrid lifted trophies that season, he didn't stand in the center of the celebrations. He stood at the edge, smiling, clapping, watching. For him, joy wasn't about spotlight. It was about shared success. When asked what it meant to wear the white shirt, he answered simply, it means never thinking you've arrived. That humility, that hunger, that peace. It was everything Real Madrid stood for. He wasn't just part of their legacy. He was becoming it. Late one night, long after training, he walked alone across the empty Bernabéu pitch. The floodlights were dimmed, the city quiet outside. He stood in the center circle, hands in his pockets, and looked around. It was silent, serene, sacred. He thought of the boy who once practiced in the rain, the teenager who left home, the young man who dared to dream. He smiled. We did it, he whispered. But there's more. He wasn't talking about trophies or fame. He was talking about growth, about the endless journey towards something just out of reach. Not perfection, but peace in pursuit. Because that's what Real Madrid had given him. Not a crown, not a title, but understanding. That greatness isn't about shouting that you're the best. It's about being silent when the world already knows. And as he left the stadium that night, the wind whispered through the stands. Not noise, not applause. Just a feeling, the kind of quiet only legends earn. Madrid had changed him, but it hadn't consumed him. Jude Bellingham was still the same boy who loved the feeling of the ball on his foot and the smell of freshly cut grass. Only now, the grass belonged to the greatest stadiums in the world, and the eyes that watched him weren't just his neighbors. They were millions, yet fame had no gravity for him. He moved through it lightly, untouched, like someone who understood that recognition wasn't the goal, just a reflection of consistency. Every match, every touch, every decision carried the same quiet precision, the same sense of duty. He no longer played to prove himself. He played to honor the game itself. As he entered his 20s, something changed in how people spoke about him. They stopped calling him the future and started calling him the standard. Coaches, pundits, legends, they all said the same thing. He was rewriting what it meant to be a modern footballer. He wasn't just skill and speed. He was intelligence, composure, empathy. He led with his presence. He didn't dominate the room by speaking. He filled it by being still. He's not loud, one Madrid teammate said. But when he talks, everyone stops. That was his power. Calmness in a world that never stopped shouting. He carried that calmness back home, too. Each international break, he stepped off the plane in England like a returning king, though he never acted like one. For the fans, he was hope personified. For his teammates, he was glue. And for the country, he was the future they had been waiting for. Not just because of his talent, but because of his temperament. England had seen brilliance before. What they hadn't seen was balance. Jude brought that. Youth without recklessness, confidence without arrogance, fire without chaos. Southgate once said, "He's not the player you build a team around. He's the player who makes the team whole." It was true. Whether he played deep or advanced, wide or central, Jude brought connection. The game bent around his rhythm. When he slowed down, the team breathed. When he accelerated, they followed. He was never trying to be the star. He was trying to make others shine. That attitude made him universally respected. Former players called him a throwback, a nod to an era when professionalism and humility were inseparable. Yet he was unmistakably modern. His awareness of mental health, equality, and the world beyond football made him more than an athlete. He didn't chase influence. He earned it through substance. When he spoke, he didn't deliver slogans. He spoke truths. "You can't inspire people by pretending to be perfect," he once said. "You inspire them by being honest about what it takes." Off the pitch, he built a quiet life in Spain. No extravagance, no scandals, no headlines beyond football. His home was simple. Books, photos, records, a few framed shirts that mattered most. One was Birmingham's number 22, another Dortmund's yellow, and on the wall beside them his first England shirt, signed by teammates with a note from his father. "Stay grounded. Stay grateful." He read that line often. It reminded him that roots mattered as much as wings. His parents still called every week. His mother's questions never changed. "Are you eating well? Sleeping enough?" His father's advice never stopped. "Remember who you are when no one's watching." And his brother, Job, now carving his own path, sent him clips of his goals. Jude always replied the same: "Proud of you. Keep going." Family wasn't a retreat from his career. It was the foundation of it. As Real Madrid's seasons passed, he began to take on a new role: mentor, leader, bridge. When younger players joined, they sought him out. "What's it like?" they'd ask. He'd smile and say, "It's hard. It's beautiful. It's worth it." He taught them through example, through how early he arrived, how late he stayed, how focused he remained. "You can't demand respect," he told one of them. "You earn it every day, quietly." That quiet excellence became his legacy. Journalists loved to talk about his maturity. "He's 21 going on 31, one wrote. But Jude didn't see it as maturity. He saw it as perspective. "Football teaches you time," he said. "You don't get more of it. You just learn how to use it better." That was the secret behind his calmness, an understanding that moments were fleeting, but meaning was permanent. When he captained England for the first time, he didn't make a speech. He just stood in the center of the circle, looked at his teammates and said softly, "Play free. Play proud." That was it. But it worked. The match ended in victory, and when reporters asked what leadership meant to him, he replied, "It's not about being followed. It's about walking the same path together." The world around him kept changing. Transfers, breaking records, football turning faster, noisier, more commercial. But Jude stayed untouched by the rush. He cared about legacy, not trends. When asked about social media fame, he said, "It's not about followers. It's about the ones who follow your example." His words weren't crafted for impact. They were simply who he was: thoughtful, deliberate, real. He also began to speak more openly about pressure. "Pressure isn't something you escape," he said during one interview. "It's something you learn to breathe in. Once you stop fighting it, you start mastering it." Fans quoted that line everywhere. Coaches printed it in dressing rooms. It wasn't motivation, it was philosophy. Jude had turned the chaos of expectation into clarity. The seasons in Madrid rolled on like chapters in a quiet novel. There were trophies, La Liga, Champions League nights, unforgettable goals. But what lingered most wasn't what he won. It was how he carried himself through it all. He didn't scream when he scored. He didn't sulk when he failed. He moved with composure, like someone who knew that triumph and struggle were the same lesson in different clothes. In one Champions League final, under the bright lights and global cameras, he assisted the winning goal. As teammates celebrated wildly, he jogged to the touchline, bent down, and tied his bootlace. Later, when asked why, he laughed. "Because I didn't want to trip on the way back." It was the perfect metaphor for him, grounded even in glory. As he matured, comparisons returned to Gerrard, Lampard, Zidane. But this time he didn't reject them. He accepted them with humility. "They're my heroes," he said. "But every story is written differently." Then he added, "I'm just trying to make mine worth reading." England, too, began to feel different with him at the center. The team no longer carried the same fear of failure. There was freedom, fluidity, belief. Bellingham was the conductor, sometimes quiet, sometimes fiery, always present. "He gives us balance," Southgate said. "When he's on the pitch, everything feels possible." At 25, he led England to a major tournament final. The match was chaos, drama, tension, heartbreak. They lost narrowly, but the nation didn't mourn. They stood and applauded, because they knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Jude stood on the pitch afterward, his eyes calm, his hand over his heart. He looked around at his teammates, then at the fans, and smiled. "We'll be back," he mouthed. "No bravado, just certainty." In the years that followed, he continued to rise, not as a star, but as a symbol. He represented something bigger than football: composure, intelligence, integrity. He showed that success didn't require arrogance, that dominance could coexist with decency. Coaches used his clips to teach discipline. Parents told their children to watch how he carried himself. He had become more than a player. He was a mirror, reflecting what football could still be at its best. As time went on, the question shifted from, how good can he be, to how long can he stay this good? But Jude didn't chase longevity. He chased meaning. "Every game is temporary," he said once, "but the impression you leave can last forever." And that was his secret. He didn't play for applause. He played for memory. One evening, long after another training session, he sat in the empty Bernabéu again, just like he had years before. The seats were silver in the fading light, the silence almost spiritual. He thought about the boy in Stourbridge, the teenager in Dortmund, the man in Madrid. Every step, every mistake, every triumph had led him here, not to fame but to peace. He smiled to himself. "It was never about proving them wrong," he whispered. "It was about proving me right." Outside, Madrid slept. Inside, one light still glowed, the light of a player who understood that greatness isn't noise. It's stillness, not dominance but grace. And somewhere, across England, a child was watching his highlights before bed, eyes wide with wonder, maybe dribbling a ball against the wall, maybe whispering a dream into the dark. That's how it begins. That's how it always begins. Because every generation needs its hero. And for this one, it's him, Jude Bellingham, the future King of England.